Hello, fourth graders. Today we are learning how to read an essay rubric and then how to use this rubric to grade an essay. And this is super important because you are going to use this rubric all year to grade your own essays and to grade each other's essays too. So this is going to be a longer video because normally I would do this with you at school in class, and we can't do that this year. Therefore, it is really, really important that you watch the whole thing and you really work with me during this rubric lesson so that you can come to school really understanding how to read this. So first, we're just going to go ahead and talk about just the rubric, okay? And then we'll get into actually grading these essays. So I'll put these aside. And I'll zoom in. Okay. So here's the essay rubric. It looks like a lot at first, but since you're the one actually writing the essay, all of these things are going to make sense very quickly because they're things that you already know how to do, so it'll sound familiar. But here's how it works. We have 4 columns. And the goal is to try to get as many things in this column as you can. So this column is called meeting, and that's basically a pass or a proficient or a good grade. And then if you do these things, that's more advanced, or it's called above here. If you have more in this column, that means you're close. So you're approaching meeting. And then this column would be not meeting. When you're reading an essay, you want to check and see what things you did, and if you did them, you highlight it. And then at the end, you look to see where we've highlighted. If we've highlighted a lot in this column, or a lot in this column, or a lot in this column. And then we add up the points, and I'll show you the points at the very end. There are also rows. So we have a row here for focus. We have a row for organization. We have a row for evidence. And we have a row for language. So we look at each row one at a time. Basically, we're going to look at the essay and just say, how focused is it? Is this person really writing about what the prompt asked them to write about? In our case, it is Frindle and the character traits. So, did I really write about Frindle and the character traits? Or did I write about something else? Did it seem like I was a little confused about what I was writing about? All right, so we'll just look for focus. And let's say, okay, I responded to most parts of the prompt, but not all of them. And I demonstrated that I understood the topic. I understood what I was writing about, and I showed that, but maybe I didn't write about both characters. I only wrote about one character, so that's just most parts of the prompt, okay? So you would think about the focus, and you would highlight how you think you did in focus. Okay, so let's take a look at that a little more. So not meeting would be I responded to little or no parts of the prompt. That would be like if you didn't write anything or if you wrote about something completely different. I demonstrated little or no understanding of the topic or text. So when you're reading or when I'm reading your essay and you can really tell, oh, this person didn't really know what we were writing about. They wrote about the wrong thing. That's when we would highlight these, okay? Approaching would be, okay, I responded to most parts of the prompt. So it asked for 2 character traits and I only did 1. Or I wrote about Janet and I wrote about Nick, but I didn't quite get their personality traits, but I got a little bit of it. Maybe I mentioned Janet's personality trait, but I didn't mention Nick's. Okay? I demonstrated limited understanding of the topic or text. So that's if I'm reading it and I say, okay, sounds like this person mostly knew what we were talking about, but didn't quite understand what we were doing. Maybe they were copying off the board and using those sentence stems, but it doesn't really seem like they really know what we're writing about. This would be meeting, so we're still in focus. So if you're meeting in focus, it says, I responded to every part of the prompt. So that means you did everything the prompt asked you to. You wrote an essay. It's about 2 character traits. It's about Frindle, and you're showing that you really understand what you're writing about. Personalities, character traits. And then to get into the advanced is when you respond really well and you really, really show that you know what you're talking about. And I can usually see that in those extra sentences that you add in that really show that you know what you are writing about. So we would just look at focus and we would highlight. So maybe this person demonstrated they kind of understood, they did understand, but they left something out. Okay, and then we would choose a score for focus. For focus, you can either get a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. Now this is split here, but we're going to go down, okay, because you need to fill a box up to get it. We can't get that 3 if we didn't get that. So this person got a 2 in focus, this made-up person that I'm talking about. Let's talk about organization. In my opinion, organization is the easiest one because we're just checking off. Do I have all the parts of an essay or not? Okay. So for a not meeting, it would be that there are not paragraphs. So if everything that a student wrote was just in one big line or chunk and it isn't separated out, then I would highlight that. I didn't group related information. So if you write about Janet and her being forgiving, but then you have evidence about Nick, and then all of a sudden you're writing about Janet again, things are kind of out of order, then that's when we would say, ooh, related information isn't grouped together. Transition words, like for example, to continue, if those are missing, then we would highlight here, okay? When we get into our approaching, so we're still in organization, so that could be a 1. To get a 2 in organization, that's approaching. It would mean you have almost everything, but there's something missing, like a conclusion. So conclusion is missing, or a piece of evidence is missing, or the hook is missing. Okay? This says some ideas are grouped together, but some are out of order or do not make sense. So some things are out of order. Not everything, but some things are out of order. And then maybe you're missing 1 transition or 2 transitions, or if you use the wrong transition. Okay? This is our meeting, and let me actually zoom in a little bit more here. That's a little better, isn't it? Okay, so here's our meeting for organization. You would just check, do you have all the parts? Do you have a hook? Check. Do you have a thesis? That's that sentence that says what your essay is about. Do you have your 2 key star ideas? Do you have evidence? Do you have a conclusion, and does it have 2 sentences? At least. Are your transitions effective? That means you use them and you put the right ones in the right place. Do you have 4 separate paragraphs? So that means when you publish it, you have 4 separate paragraphs. And did you mention the title of the text somewhere? If you did all of that, then you can highlight here. But if you're missing something, you have to highlight here, and that takes you down to a 2. All right? So that would be to get a 3. To get a 4, my ideas and the information are really clear for the reader. I have unique or advanced transition words, and I'll show you in a bit what that looks like. And you mention the author, so not just the text, but the author as well, to get a 4. So, just like before, you can either get, for organization, you get a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. Let's say in this case with this made up essay that this person did all these things, okay? So we'll call that one a 3 because we highlighted everything there. And then we'll say for organization, we got a 3. So a 2 in focus and a 3 in organization. Now the next column is the next row is all about evidence. It's just about that evidence. Do you have it? Is it specific? Did you cite your evidence? Does it match your key star idea? If I say Nick is clever, then my evidence should not be about Janet, right? All right, so for our lower category, which is the not meeting, If we're not meeting, it means there isn't enough evidence. If there's just a little bit of evidence or it's really short evidence, then we would say there isn't enough evidence. So that would be a 1. To get a 2 in evidence, I put evidence, but it isn't very specific or informative. Sometimes I see this when students just write something they remember from the text, like, oh, Mrs. Deaver was mean to Janet. But that's not very specific. More specific would be to take it out of the text and put quotes around it and tell us exactly what it says in the text, and then maybe explain that in your own words after, but your evidence should be very specific. My evidence doesn't match with the key star ideas. This would be like if we said that Janet was forgiving, but then we had evidence just about Janet getting in trouble, but we didn't put evidence about when Janet actually forgave Nick. You want the evidence to match. To get a 3, so here the 3 is the meeting column. So to get a 3, you need to cite your evidence. So according to page 5, or I found my evidence on page 5 where it states, okay? Your evidence should be specific and informative. So we want to learn something from your evidence. I explain my evidence. That's that pink box where you really explain. This makes Nick clever because And then just making sure that your evidence makes sense and it matches the key star ideas. Here's how to get a 4 or an advanced in evidence. If you have extra evidence, so some students put evidence and then they said, also on page 9 it states, and they put some extra. Or there were a couple of students who have a lot of evidence. Okay, my evidence matches really, really well with the key star ideas, and I explained my evidence really well. All right, our last one is language, and you've probably seen things like this before where teachers want to check that you're spelling things correctly, your sentences are correct, and that's what this row is just about, okay? Sentence structure. If it's not correct, meaning there's a lot of run-on sentences or not full sentences or periods, capitals, things like that are missing. And there are so many errors it's hard to read. For a 2, which is approaching, some sentences have correct structure. There's some mistakes with spelling or grammar or very basic words. So if you just said Nick was nice and you just said nice over and over again, and you didn't use words like personality, character traits, and a variety of words, that might go here. To get a 3, all the sentences are correct in structure. So that means we don't have run-on sentences. All the sentences are written correctly. There aren't any missing words, so when you read a sentence, we didn't accidentally leave words out. There are very few mistakes, and there are some interesting words like personality, character traits. To get a 4, a lot of you are already doing these things. So my sentence structure is varied. That means that you have some of your sentences are short, some of your sentences are long. Some of your sentences start in a different way than others, so it doesn't just sound like a robot where every sentence is the same. There are no errors. You have interesting and advanced words, and there's fluidity and voice. Voice in your writing is when it really sounds like a person really wrote it and they're telling you, in fact, or they're adding, for example, wow, I wouldn't want a teacher like that, would you? Or sounds like Janet's a great person to know, isn't she? So you're adding in those extra sentences that make your essay fun, and it really sounds like someone is, a real person is there kind of discussing it with you, right? So let's go ahead and zoom out here. So you would just go one thing at a time. So you do focus and kind of highlight where you think the essay falls, then organization, then evidence, and then language. Let's say that this person has mistakes with their spelling and grammar, and they use some basic words, but their sentence structure was okay. In this case, they would get a 2 in language because they have more highlighted here, and they need to fill a box up, and they just don't have enough here to get a 3. So they got a 2 in language and a 3 for their evidence. So then what you would do is you would add it all up and see what score they got. But you can also kind of look at it like this. This person got a fair amount in the meeting column, but you know, they didn't fill everything up in the meeting column, so they're probably gonna be approaching, which means they're almost meeting, okay? Because we gotta fill it up to get that. So they got a 2 plus 3 plus 3 plus 2, which is a 10, and 10 actually falls in the approaching. So that's the score. When you are grading today, whoops, ran out of room, that's okay. When you are grading today, I want you to give the essay, oh, sorry, you couldn't see that. Give the essay a grade by adding these up and write their category, okay? So this essay fell into the approaching. Even though a lot of it's really good, we didn't fill this column up, so it's 1 column down. Now, you have 3 essays you are going to grade, and I want you to take your time. It is a lot to do this, but normally I'd get to do this with you in school, and I really, really want you to work hard on it so that you can use this as a resource all year. So if you understand how to do this and you want to dive in by yourself, you can stop the video and try it by yourself, but you need to actually bring the rubric back with the essay, and I want to see something like this. I don't want to see very good essay, 12. I really want to see you showing, highlighting what that person did and didn't do in the essay to get that grade, okay? And if you want help, that's great news for you because you can actually do the whole thing with me right now. We're going to do the whole thing together. So you can even just follow along with me as we go. So we have example essay A, B, and C. I mean, you can already kind of look at them and see, like, there's a pretty big difference, right? In some of these. Okay, each one gets its own rubric. You are going to grab a pen or a highlighter or something to mark the rubric with, okay? First step is to read the essay. So I want you to pause the video, please pause it right now and read that to yourself. Really read it and think through how you think that person did. Okay, so pause my video now and read the essay, please. Okay, the first thing we're going to grade for is the focus. So how focused was this essay? Did they write about Frindle? Did they write about the characters? Does it sound like they know what they're talking about? Oh, and I should say all of these essays were written by Mrs. Clark. They're all me. None of them are an actual person in our class, so you don't need to worry about that. So I want you to decide, and if you end up thinking something different than me right now, that's okay. Do you think this person in essay A that you hopefully just read, if you didn't, pause it and read it, do you think this person responded to every part of the prompt or just most parts? Does it sound, when you're reading it, does it sound like they know what they're talking about and what we're doing with this? Or does it more sound like they were just kind of following the steps, copying off the board, but they don't really know what the essay is supposed to be about, okay? Did they respond to no parts of the prompt? Were they writing about something completely different? Like, whoa, they don't know what they're writing about. Then you would highlight here. In my opinion, this person responded to every part of the prompt. This is what I'm highlighting. And they did demonstrate that they understand it. This is a pretty solid essay, and here's why. In their introduction, their hook has to do with characters and personalities. And in their thesis, they describe exactly what they're going to talk about. It's very clear. The focus is there. They say, here's what I'm writing about, and the hook is related to that. And then they have their 2 key star ideas, and everything matches. They're talking about Miss Deaver, and that's all they did here, and they talked about Miss Avery. And then at the end, they mentioned personalities again, so it really sounds like they know what we're talking about. So I gave them a solid 3 there. Now let's talk about organization. I want you to pause the video, pause it please, and look for organization and check off, do they have these things? Do they have a hook? Do they have a thesis? Do they have key star ideas? So please do that now. All right, well, I saw that, yes, they have a hook, and the hook makes sense too, right? They have a hook. They have a thesis. I'm going to describe the personalities of 2 characters. They have 2 key star ideas. They have this one, Mrs. Deaver, and they have this one, Mrs. Avery. They have evidence. That's the red. Red, red. And their conclusion does have 2 sentences. Okay. Do they have 4 separate paragraphs? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Their transitions are good and they're not missing any, right? There should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 transitions, and they all make sense. They have to begin and to continue. For their evidence, they have for example. For their explanation, they have therefore. You know more transitions than that, but these ones make sense. And then the one here makes sense, okay? The only thing they didn't do is they didn't mention the title, did they? So, if they didn't mention the title, they're very, very close to a 3, right? So, in this case, this is kind of a judgment call. When I'm grading, I might actually just give this one a 3. If you want to be really strict, like Mrs. Granger, you could bump it down to a 2 for not mentioning the title of the text, and that would be fine. Okay? I decided to go ahead and give it a 3 because it really is a solid essay. So they have a 3 in focus and a 3 in organization. Evidence. The evidence column is really easy because all you have to do is look at a couple sentences. So look at this evidence and look at that evidence, right? So I would like you to pause the video, read the evidence, and decide where you think they fall on the evidence. So this first evidence, they cited it, right? They told us where it was. My evidence is on page 2. They put it in quotes, which is important. And it is specific. The next day, all the girls wore paper flowers in their hair and all the boys wore sunglasses and beach hats. Mrs. Deaver clapped her hands and said, "It's so colorful." That's important that they mentioned this part about Mrs. Deaver and not just this part, but that they have all of it. They didn't just say Mrs. Deaver clapped her hands. That wouldn't make sense. They talked about the flowers and the sunglasses and the hats and then Mrs. Deaver. So this is specific because it's right from the text. And it is informative because it's long enough and it really shows us her easygoing personality. So this is great evidence and it matches with the key star idea. And I would actually say the same for the second evidence. They cited it, they told us where they got it, and it's very specific. This is exact from the text. There are quotation marks around it, and it's informative. It matches the key star idea because the key star idea is about Miss Avery being mean, and they put an example of Miss Avery being mean. So hopefully you kind of thought about how you would do this, but I graded this one a 3. They cited their evidence. It's specific and informative. Let's look at those explanations. This shows Mrs. Deaver's easygoing because, that's good, because she didn't get mad. So they explained it. They didn't explain it super well, right? They just said she's easygoing because she didn't get mad. They could explain more, but they did explain it, so that's solid. Therefore, this demonstrates that Mrs. Avery is mean. They explained it. They definitely could have put more, though, right? I wouldn't give it a 4 at all because they didn't really say why. But they did say that it makes her mean. So that's why I put this one in a solid 3 camp for the evidence. If you think differently, that is fine. Last but not least, we'll look at that language. Do the sentences have correct sentence structure? No words are missing, few mistakes in spelling and grammar, and some interesting words. So I found a mistake in grammar here, and then there's also a time where there are some missing quotation marks, but overall, the sentences make sense. They have periods at the end. There aren't any fragments or run-ons. Everything's a full sentence. It's all very well structured. So again, this is a solid 3. So this is a 3 down the line in my opinion. All right. So to get our final grade, and actually for the name, let's write essay A. okay? For the final grade, we would just add these up. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 12. And that's why we say a 12 to 14 is meeting, because to meet, you have to have everything and then maybe more. So this person gets a 12, and then I want you to also write meeting. Okay? So this is what a proficient or a meeting essay looks like. This is the goal this year, but a lot of you are already doing better than this already, which is really, really cool. So here's one. This is one of your essays, and this is how to grade it. Okay? You're going to do that 2 more times. So if you're feeling confident now, I definitely would suggest turn this video off and go try it on your own. Why not? But if you want some help, I'm here and we can do this one together. Example Essay B. Please pause the video right now and read Essay B by yourself. Go. All right, so I just read it. I hope you did too. And we're going to talk about focus. But you know, you can also kind of see, right? We can already see that this one's a lot shorter than this one. Okay. Imagine being in a book. I'm going to describe Mrs. Deaver and Mrs. Avery. Now you know the personality of Mrs. Avery and Mrs. Deaver. They've got their key star ideas. Mrs. Deaver is easygoing, Mrs. Avery is mean. Technically, they did respond to the prompt. So we're talking about focus here. Did they respond? I mean, they mentioned 2 characters. And they told us why one of them is easygoing and why one is mean. They did describe the personality traits. Okay? But, so I would say, yeah, they did respond to it. But it doesn't really sound like they're very, very on board and really understanding with what we're doing. Because, for example, they say imagine being in a book, but they don't really tie that into this. They don't say, imagine being in a book. Wouldn't it be cool? The characters in books all have different personalities. Today, I'm going to describe Mrs. Deaver and Mrs. Avery from the book Frindle. They don't really show you that they know what's going on, because the hook is good, but then they didn't tie the hook into this. They're missing something. They also don't explain a lot, and this just shows me that they maybe don't really, really understand what we're writing about. They understand it pretty well, but I would probably say that's a limited understanding of what we're writing about. That's my opinion. If you put something else, that's okay. That's for focus. So we got a bump down here. So this person, which is me, but we'll call it SAB. SAB got a 2 in focus. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Now we're going to look at organization. To me, that's the easiest one because we're just checking off. Is there a hook? Is there a thesis? Did they mention the title? Are there key star ideas? Is there evidence? Is anything missing? So please pause the video, look at this, and decide, do they have everything? And you can just highlight it as you go. If they have a hook, if they have a thesis. Okay. All right, so they have a hook. They wrote, imagine being in a book. The thesis, that's just where you say what your essay is about. That's your thesis. I'm going to describe Mrs. Deaver and Mrs. Avery. They have that. Do they have key star ideas? Yes. Mrs. Deaver is easygoing. Mrs. Avery is mean. Do they have evidence? Yes, and then, I mean, yeah, they do. It's not very good, but we'll get to that, right, when we get to our evidence row. So technically they have evidence. Okay. Conclusion with 2 sentences. They have a conclusion, but there's only 1 sentence here. So I would say no to that. So I'm just not going to highlight it. Do they have transition words? So they've got, for example, therefore. They're missing 1 here. They should have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're missing 1 here. They're missing 2. So I think that warrants or makes it worth it to highlight here. Transitions are missing or incorrect. Okay. Do they have 4 separate paragraphs? Yes, they do, although this one's technically too short to be a paragraph, but yes, they do have 4 separate groupings. And did they mention the title? No, they didn't. All right. So for this one, we would bump that down. okay? Because they're missing 3 things on here, and you know, there is something missing, there's some transitions missing, so we put a 2 for organization. Now we'll look at the evidence. So I would like you to please pause the video, look at the evidence, and decide what you think about it. So this first evidence is pretty specific. The next day all the girls wore paper flowers in their hair. And then the next evidence is pretty general. It sounds like this person didn't really open the book. They just kind of said what they remembered. So let's use the rubric to help us, okay? Did they cite their evidence? Do we see page 2, page 3? Nope. There's no credit given to the book. So that's a big deal. We need to say my evidence is on page 9 where it states do. So they didn't cite their evidence. Is it specific and informative? So I would say this one is, it's right from the text, and it teaches me. It teaches me about Mrs. Deaver. But this one is very general. Mrs. Avery got mad. Okay, well, can you tell us, you know, going back to that first one, this is what specific evidence looks like. So I would say no, it's not specific or informative, which means I can actually say this. I put evidence, but it isn't specific or informative. Okay. I explained my evidence, did I? This shows Mrs. Deaver's easygoing because she didn't get mad, yes. It demonstrates that Mrs. Avery is mean. I mean, that's kind of like this last one, so kind of explained it. Could be better though, right? But all right, okay, we kind of explained it there. Does the evidence make sense? Yeah, it matches the key star idea. We said Mrs. Deaver is easygoing, and this matches that. We said she's mean, and that matches that. So the evidence makes sense. It's just not very specific, right? So this would be a 2. All right, let's look at language. So imagine being in a book. This should be a period instead of a question mark. I'm going to describe Mrs. Deaver and Mrs. Avery. That's fine. These are all full sentences. There aren't a bunch of missing words or anything, and there aren't really long run-on sentences. There are periods in here, so yeah, sentence structure is fine. When I read it through, I don't see any missing words. That would be, you know, sometimes we just forget to put a word into a sentence like that, but everything looks like it's there. And there aren't a lot of mistakes, right? I found that question mark. Other than that, it looks pretty good. Are there interesting words? Let's see. Well, there's personalities, demonstrates, describe. So yeah, I would say, you know, easygoing, therefore, yeah, I would say that this has some interesting words. So I would mostly give this a 3. So here we are. We got a 2 in evidence and a 3 in language, and we'll add it up. That's a 9, and a 9 would be approaching. So remember, you can just follow along and do this with me, okay? I hope you're pausing the video and trying it out on your own, and then if you get something different from me, that's totally fine. This is more about the process of you giving it a try. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, just follow along with me. We have one more. Example essay C. You can already kind of tell, right, that this one is maybe leaning in a certain direction. You can infer probably what we're going to do with this. Please pause the video and read it to yourself. And now we're going to grade it. So does this person, did they respond to the prompt? Did they write about the correct thing? Yes, they did. And did they show that they really understand what they're talking about? They did. And the way that I know that, a lot of it is this extra stuff. They have a hook that makes sense, and then they kind of bring us along and they tie their hook into the title, and then they put their title in, and then they draw us into their thesis. All of this is very focused. It's all about character traits, and they're showing us that they really know what they're talking about. And then they do that also in their explanations. It's very focused, and their conclusion is very focused. So grade it how you think it should be graded. You can pause the video. Oh, I should say SAC. I would say they responded really well, or you could say every part, you know, and sometimes I'll highlight 2 of these and then at the end I'll kind of decide where I think the essay leans. I really think though this person has a solid understanding of the topic. They really know what they're talking about and they really understand Frindle too. They really understand the book and these characters. So I would give them a 4 for focus. Please do organization next. I want you to pause the video and highlight. Do you think that they really understand what they're doing with the organization? Meaning, do they have all the parts of an essay? And you can just go through and look for them and check them off. All right, so I went through. They have a hook, and the hook makes sense too, right? The hook really leads us into the thesis. I'm going to describe the personalities. They have 2 key star ideas. Mrs. Deaver is easygoing. Mrs. Avery has a mean personality. They have their evidence. They have their conclusion, and their conclusion has 1, 2, 3 sentences. Their transitions are effective, and even I would say this one is advanced because they recognize that in this case, in this essay, we are contrasting 2 things. Contrasting is when they're different and we're showing how they're different. So this transition doesn't work with every essay, but they used it correctly here, which makes it unique. So I would say they have unique transition words. They have their 4 paragraphs. They mentioned the title. They mentioned the author, and they did it well too. They didn't just throw Andrew Clements in there. They said, written by Andrew Clements. In fact, Andrew Clements paints us a picture of some pretty unique characters. So they really did a good job. What do you think? When you read this, do you think they're really, really clear? Like, could someone who has never read Frindle ever understand this? If so, that's how we get to this column. If they've explained it in a way that someone who doesn't know anything about Mrs. Deaver and Mrs. Avery could really understand it, then they get a 4 there. All right, so please pause the video now. Take a look at the evidence, that's the red, and grade it. What do you think about that evidence? All right, so here's how I graded the evidence. Hopefully you tried it on your own. If not, pause the video. They did cite it. And they cited it in a unique way, meaning that for this one they said my evidence is on page 2 where it says. And then for this one they said according to the page 5 it states. So they cited the evidence and they did it well. It is specific, right? You have 1, 2, 3 lines here of evidence and 1, 2, 3 lines. I wouldn't say it's extra evidence, but it is specific. So they cited it. They don't have extra, but it is good. It's informative and it's specific. It's direct. They explained it. Oh my goodness, they explained it. Look at that. That's awesome how much they explained it. There's even 2 sentences here about Mrs. Deaver. Instead, she really enjoyed the prank. So I would say they explained it really well. And my evidence matches really well. Yeah, it does. So I could say, you know, it makes sense. And then if you want, you can match it really well. Okay? Finally, take a look at the language. Okay? So in this example, the sentence structure is varied, which means that some of the sentences start in different ways, and there's a combo of short and long sentences. I didn't find any errors. They have interesting words. Demonstrates, actually. They have this. These extra sentences are what add that fluidity and the voice into the writing. Okay? So these extra, the sentences in black, those are what make it sound fluid, gives it some voice. When they say, that's certainly the case in the book Frindle, or when they say, well, today's your lucky day, those are the things that add that voice. So I decided to give this a 4. And when we take a look, this one might be more a 3. So the focus, we gave it a 4. Organization 4. Evidence 3, because they don't have extra, but it's still very good. Language 4. And so if I add up 4 plus 4 plus 3 plus 4, that would be a 15, which is above, okay? So that's how you use a rubric. Later on, you'll get to use it on your own, another day on your own essay, but that's how you use a rubric to grade an essay. All right, let me know if you have any questions, and when you come back to class, you need to have each essay graded like this, and I want to see the grade at the top and the actual column that they fell into.